Discussing extroverted feeling at its worst is going to be a little complicated for me, and let me explain why. First of all, one of my absolute favorite people that I know is an ESFJ, extroverted feeling at the top. So it's not as though I have problems with all high FE people, but I will say that most of the run-ins that I've had in my life with people that I had difficulty resolving those issues, those complications, those conflicts, most of those run-ins were with people who were FE at the top or all in on their FE one way or the other. It just seems like I struggle to understand them and they struggle to understand me. And so we don't always jive very well. So I'm afraid it could be easy for me in this video to go off on a tangent, just sort of railing against high FE people because I've never gotten along with them very well. But that's really not my goal. My goal is to be accurate and informative, not emotional or not just making stuff up to have the opportunity to vent or something of that nature. So if you're a high FE person, first of all, I want you to know that this video is not meant to pick on extroverted feeling. I'm making a series of videos, and this is the next to last one in that series. Every cognitive function provides a great service to the world, and every cognitive function can be a problem and can be detrimental to the person who uses it and those around them. So one of the first things that I see with extroverted feeling at the top, or let me rephrase that, with extroverted feeling when it's all in, is that it is obsessed oftentimes with ranking human beings. And that gets a little annoying to people who are not obsessed with ranking human beings. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. Extroverted feeling seems to have a tendency, maybe a little bit more so when it's combined with sensing than with intuition, but extroverted feeling has a tendency when it's all in, when it's over the top, to sort of look at human beings on a spectrum, and it's almost on a spectrum of value, and that value can be based on different things. So this is gonna vary amongst different people who are all in on their FE, depending on what they have been taught or what conclusions they have come to about what makes a person valuable. But what you'll find is that when people are all in on their extroverted feeling, they not only tend to know where everybody ranks in the group as far as their job, as far as their financial level, as far as maybe their education level, but they cannot help but bring it up. They can't stop talking about it. So let me give you an example. I might say something like, oh, I went to the ball game with my son and I saw a former coworker there, a guy named Greg, nice guy. Yeah, we had a good conversation. Everything was great. Okay. An extroverted feeling person, especially when it's over the top. So this is not all extroverted feeling people, but when extroverted feeling is over the top, it's going to be more like this. I went to the ball game yesterday with my son. My son, who just got accepted into Yale, yeah, he's going to be majoring in chemistry at Yale, and he's already got 3 jobs lined up for whenever he graduates. Pretty exciting. Anyway, my son and I were at the ball game and we ran into a former coworker, Greg, the CEO of XYZ Medical. Yeah, Greg was there with his wife, Janice, who's the head of the Board of Education at the local school district. Anyway, I was asking Greg about his and Janice's son, and their son, Tom, turns out just got accepted into whatever state school university, and he graduated from his class summa cum laude, and he's been accepted on a full scholarship to the. Okay, I don't need all that. I don't need you to tell me where everybody ranks in the group. I don't need to know what their job is. I don't need to know that they're the head of whatever company or department or whatever it is that they do. I don't need to know what school they go to. I don't need to know if they got into that school on a scholarship. I don't need to know if they're the starting quarterback for the high school football team. I don't need to know any of that stuff. It can also look like I knew a lady who was extroverted feeling over the top, and she had to say, every time she talked about her brother, she couldn't just say, my brother this or my brother and I that. She's had to say, my brother who was this rank in this branch of the military is doing this. And oh, by the way, he makes six figures a year now that he's retired doing this other job. So anyway, my brother and I were doing this, and we took his car, which is a, whatever, Lincoln Navigator that cost him this many thousands of dollars, and he buys a brand new one every 6 years or whatever it is. And the conversation when Effie is at its worst, I'm starting to get a little emotional. I think this whole thing drives me so crazy. But again, my goal is not to pick on, but to just educate and point out things that I see. So let me reel myself back in a little bit. I'm sorry about that. The whole purpose of the conversation should be to just say, my brother and I did this. My son and I went to this place. I ran into an old coworker, whatever. But the conversation tends, when the person is extroverted feeling over the top, the conversation tends to just devolve into this, let me tell you why you ought to be impressed by this person and why you ought to be impressed by that person. It's this constant need to rank all of the human beings based on all sorts of different criteria. One FE user's criteria could be money. Another one's criteria could be education. Another one's could be their employment, some other sort of status. Whatever it is that for whatever reason has become extremely important to that FE user, it becomes this ranking game, and they cannot help but let that leak out into all of their communication. The other thing that I see with extroverted feeling whenever it is all in is that it is addicted to equality. Now, on the surface, addiction to equality is a beautiful thing. Wanting all people to be heard, wanting all human beings to have a voice is a noble, fantastic ideal. Wanting no one person or group of people to be left behind, but all people to be lifted up to a status of equality is wonderful. And it's an ideal worth striving for and fighting for. However, what I see with some people when they're extroverted feeling is over the top. You really can burn yourself out, burn yourself up, and wear out all of the people that are with you along for the ride if you never allow yourself to settle into the reality that there will be some people in this world that you can't help. There will be some people in this world who can't be pulled up to the level of equality with everyone else. We all wish we lived in utopia, but we don't. And maybe this is maybe this is me being too much of a realist. I'm not sure. Maybe I could use a little dose of extroverted feeling in this area. But sometimes I think I see people who are extroverted feeling all in almost make themselves miserable in their never-ending, relentless pursuit of trying to establish equality in the whole earth. And sometimes you just need to do the best you can in the tiny little corner of the world that you live in, and not kill yourself trying to accomplish what seems to me anyway as being feats of unrealism. I'm almost checking myself now going, am I just being a defeatist in saying this? So let's move on to the other point that I wanted to make. When extroverted feeling is over the top, I think that at times it doesn't allow for individuality. I talked about this a little bit in my extroverted thinking at its worst video. Extroverted feeling sort of sees the world as a we're all in this together sort of situation. It sees the group that it runs in as like this one unit that all sort of functions together, and we should all be in this together, and we should all have the same emotional state and the same value. It doesn't necessarily know on its own what it values or what it finds to be of great importance. It takes its cues from the group. Well, if the group's values are wrong, then it can end up chasing after wrong ideals or wrong values. But even if the group's ideals are good and correct, it's still to an extent, or to a large extent, especially when it's all in or at its worst, it's just borrowing its ideals. It's borrowing its values from the group, and it doesn't always have its own strong identity. If you contrast that to someone with FI, the introverted feeling high user, or maybe even over the top user, is going to have a strong, firm identity. This is who I am. This is what I value. This is what I stand for. This is what I believe in. And even if the whole world stands against them, the high FI user is going to say, I don't care. I have planted my flag in the sand for what I know to be right and what I know to be good. When extroverted feeling is over the top or all in, it's going to plant its flag in the sand based on what everyone else is planting their flag in the sand on. It's going to die on the same hill that everyone else is willing to die on, whether or not that hill is actually worth dying on. Extroverted feeling is a sort of a disrespecter of identity and individualism. It wants everybody to sort of be consumed into this great melting pot of co-humanity where everyone works together and functions together and values together and laughs together and cries together and all these things. And while I do see great value in that, because there is great value in all of the cognitive functions, at times you've got to be able to establish your own identity. At times you've got to be able to be who you are regardless of what everyone else says you should be, or value what you value regardless of what everyone else says you should value. An extroverted feeling is largely going to be void of that. It's not necessarily always going to know who it is at its very core, but it's going to define itself by largely how everyone else defines it, or it's going to want to melt into the group of what everyone else considers to be good and beneficial and valuable. Now, of course, we have a lot of conflicts in this world about what is good and what is valuable. So the extroverted feeling high user is going to, they're going to over time establish and associate with a certain group, and that's the group that they'll take their cues from. They're not just going to take their cues from all of humanity, because if they did, they'd be getting mixed signals every second of the day. In addition to that, and this is kind of along the same lines, but maybe parting off a little bit, extroverted feeling is oftentimes going to disrespect thinking. And this is always going to be the case, right? The people who are extremely high in sensing, who have sensing first, are going to disrespect intuition. The people who have intuition first are going to disrespect sensing. And the thing is true for feeling, the same is true for feeling and thinking. Those who have feeling first are oftentimes going to disrespect thinking. Now, what does that look like in the extroverted feeling user's mind? Well, that means that they may sacrifice accuracy, knowledge, truth, and understanding for the sake of everybody feeling good together, everybody getting along, everybody having a good time, everybody sort of vibing together. Now, of course, vibing together and having a good time and getting along with one another is valuable. There's no doubt about that. But sometimes if that's at the expense of accuracy and truth, then it's not so valuable, because sometimes we need to make sure that we are sticking to our guns on what is right and true, even if it means that the vibe of the group disintegrates. And I think this also comes from that sort of disrespecting of identity on the part of those who are all in on FE, because their identity really is their TI. Introverted thinking is going to be where their identity is tied up, but it's going to be a weak identity. When they're all in on extroverted feeling, it means that they devote almost no time to cultivating their identity, which is all tied up in their introverted thinking. They're not only going to not know who they are, but they may not know what they think or what they believe. They may not know on what truths they feel comfortable or justified standing firm on and saying, this is my truth, this is who I am, this is what I believe to be right. Because they're not only burying the need to cultivate their identity, they're burying their need to cultivate their understanding, their accuracy, and their dedication to logic and truth. But then on top of that, they are replacing that or supplanting that with a borrowed identity that they take from just bleeding into the group and whatever its identity is. Extroverted feeling at its worst, I think, becomes a machine of let's take a poll of everyone around us and become a conglomeration of all of that without ever really knowing for sure who we are, or who I am if I'm an extroverted feeling all in user, who I am at my very core. I hope you found this informational, entertaining, useful in some way. If you did, please give it a like. Please also subscribe if you have not already. Thank you so much for watching, and have an awesome day. Bye now.